Thank you so much for staying with us. This morning we have with us to discuss one of the issues, lined up for us this morning. The appointment of the chiefs of the anti-corruption agencies, the ICPC and the EFCC. We have with us here this morning Mr. Shittu, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Again, my pleasure to be here.
Let's begin with I don't want to call it the elephant in the room because I don't think it's so big anymore. Before we go to the issue of the EFCC, the ICPC chairman that's just been appointed or announced by the president, awaiting confirmation by the Senate. What do you make of all of the furore over the qualification or not of the EFCC chairman?
Well, I think, in my view, our focus this time around is how to rebuild the economy, how to advance our democracy, how to raise living standards, and how to support this president to deliver on his mandate. And so we should not allow for distractions at this point in time. And I'm saying that because the job of nation building is a dynamic process. If our law itself operates for the benefit of the society. And so when we take a view, we should look at the overall objectives. For instance, I've seen a lot of debate by eminent jurists over this furore that has been generated over the appointment of the new chairman of EFCC. I've read the views and I've listened to my very erudite friend, Daniel Buala. I've also listened to Mande Ubani. In fact, my senior friend, Femi Falana, has also expressed their views. All these are views in the public space because of their patriotic concerns. But my own perspective is to look at the EFCC Act itself as a broad legislation. What is the EFCC Act designed to achieve? The EFCC Act is designed to combat corruption, economic and financial crimes. And when we are talking of economic and financial crime, it has a lot of perspectives. We are talking of investigation. We are talking of intelligence gathering. We are talking of prosecution. We are talking of deployment of technical assistance. We are talking of international cooperation. So because corruption is not just local, it's an international thing. And so the focus should be who can do the job, who can deliver on all of these mandates. When we were talking of the appointment of the chairman, not issues about whether somebody is qualified or not qualified. Of course, as far as the appointment of this recent person is concerned, the issue of qualification is not even there because the man is eminently qualified.
So all of those issues being raised by Mr. Buala that you listen to, you don't see?
Mr. Buala's view focuses on literal interpretation of a statute, using the ordinary words employed by the draftsman in construing a statute. The question to ask is there the only method of interpreting a statute? Of course, Mr. Buala will also agree with me that is literal interpretation of statutes is not the only option that we available to anyone who wants to interpret a statute. We have the literal interpretation of statute. We have the golden rule of interpretation. We have the mischief rule of interpretation. Of course, we also have the purposive approach to interpretation of statutes or constitutional provisions, which looks at the overall legislative intent, the overall objective of the enactment, the purpose the enactment was enacted to serve. Now, if you look at it in all these broader contexts, will you say a lawyer is not concerned about investigation? is not concerned about prosecution. It's not concerned about law enforcement. He's a law enforcement officer. And again, the approach is that we also must agree with the fact that in this dispensation, we are blessed with an Attorney General of the Federation that is seasoned, that is experienced, that is exposed, that is bold, and that has a track record. I don't see the president of this country taking a decision to appoint the chairman of EFCC without consulting with the Attorney General.
So all those arguments...
So the Attorney General of the Federation has spoken in favor of the appointment. Because I assume that that kind of appointment cannot... I even sought audience with him, and he confirmed that he was consulted, and that he is in support of the appointment.
So all those conversations or arguments about cognate experience...
Okay, we are talking of cognate experience. Will you say Ola Olukoyede, a seasoned fraud expert, consultant, somebody who has served as a chief of staff in that law enforcement agency, somebody who has served as secretary to the commission in that law enforcement agency? And let me also make a clarification. Ola Olukoyede was never indicted. In the same way, Ibrahim Magu was never indicted in that panel. Did you see the report? Did you see any white paper? No one was indicted. It was just a needless exercise.
So how about the suspension 2 times along with the manager?
That suspension, if you are suspended pending investigation, and then you are eventually cleared, where is the issue? I'm aware that Olukoyede has been cleared of any complicity, of any allegation, and I'm saying it publicly. The office of the Chief of Staff and Secretary to the has cleared Olukoyede of any complicity. But my worry is not even the appointment of Olukoyede. My worry is about frequent changes in the appointment of chairman of anti-graft agency. We send, very negative signals, and I think the government should worry about it.
We'll definitely come to that because that.
But as for qualification,
yes.
As for qualification, Olukoyede is eminently qualified. He's a lawyer of 22 years standing, and that is his focus area. He's an expert in intelligence gathering. It is an expert in in the combat of corruption. So I don't see any issue. The issue is, of course, the man who is acting has also delivered to call. And I believe people like that also should be carried along by Olukoyede. Olukoyede should come there to EFCC to carry everybody along and reward those officers who are daily making a lot of sacrifices to ensure that we combat corruption.
Well, you talked about the frequent changes, yes. And there's, while we were having the conversation yesterday, my colleague Maokwe was pointing to the fact that, was it Mr. Monday Obani was saying that both the appointment and exit of the chairman of the EFCC have almost always been laden with one, rift, one confusion, one argument, such as we are having now, or the other. But talking about the exits of his predecessors, what are the slippery slopes that he should avoid? How exposed is he or rather, I think I've asked you this question again, this question before. How vulnerable or exposed is the office of the chairman of the EFCC in particular? We'll come to the ICPC shortly. That makes it so easy for them to fall into these traps, that had made it easy for them to fall into these traps until now. And how do we ensure that this doesn't happen again sustainably?
The law of financial inducement and the character of the person. I think mainly we have all these frequent changes, not necessarily because these individuals, some of them are compromised. No. It has to do with vested interest of the ruling elite. For instance, how committed is the ruling elite itself to the fight against corruption beyond lip service? You cannot fight corruption. There's no political will on the part of the leadership. So every EFCC chairman who wants to survive must read the body language of the ruling elite. It's a survival thing. It's just like, for instance, if for instance, look at channels. The way channels is professionally and efficiently run. Because John Momo, your chairman, offers a free hand to all of you to do your job professionally. That is what should happen. The president and those should give the chairman of EFCC or free hand to operate.
So let me just make this.
The question is, are they giving free hand?
You have operated within the system for a while. So
yes. Since inception, I've been there, so I know.
Quite valid.
Yes.
Your opinion is quite valid here.
Yes.
So when you say the ruling elite,
yes,
you definitely aren't talking about just the president.
Yes, I'm talking about those in charge of the decision-making process, those who are around the president and those around him, the legislature, the leadership of the legislature, and what they want. What are their interests? I think we have gotten to a situation where we must take a firm stand. Are we ready to fight corruption? If the answer is yes, then all those empowered with the duty to fight corruption must be supported, must be encouraged. For instance, I wouldn't pray for Olaolukoyede to come in, only to be shoved aside in very, controversial circumstances.
If that happens, does that demonstrate to you that we are not fighting corruption or we are not committed to it? I
think it demonstrates to me clearly that we are not committed to it. For instance, I'm not saying that the headship of the anti-graft agency should be corrupt. No. If the headship of the anti-graft agency is corrupt, that sends a very dangerous signal. What I'm saying is that we must be certain that the headship is corrupt on proven allegations. Not because we want to shove anybody aside. For instance, I say it publicly. What allegation of corruption has been proved against Ibrahim Magu? I can say it for free. That man is one of the most, in terms of commitment to ideals, he's not corrupt. Ibrahim Magu is not corrupt. In the same way, Nuhu Ribadu is not corrupt. Those were elements who fought corruption with passion. And they were shoved aside. And we kept quiet. No white paper, nothing. And we kept quiet. So you understand what I'm saying? I told you, I appeared before Honorable Justice Salami Pale. And I threw an open challenge when I said my appearance for Magu was conditional. That if you show me proof that this man is corrupt, this minute I will withdraw my appearance. I repeated the challenge 3 times. Even at the conclusion of the proceeding, when I was addressing the panel, there was no allegation of corruption against Magu. That man was just innocently punished. Was just punished for doing his duty. You might say Magu was high-handed. You might say he didn't deliver in terms of welfare of staff, which are also critical. But nobody can accuse him of corruption. You understand what I'm saying? In the same way, you cannot accuse anybody of corruption. But what I'm saying is that this president, having appointed Olaolukoyede as chair of EFCC, must support him to deliver.
I'm glad that you mentioned the other time that you checked with your colleague, who is the Attorney General of the Federation.
Yes, I checked
now,
with him.
And he said,
I sought to deal with him. The Attorney General of the Federation,
qualified.
Lateef Fagbemi is here. Yes. And he okayed the appointment of Olaolukoyede.
Now,
and as the Chief Law Officer of the Federation, I stand by his decision. If you believe that what the Chief Law Officer of the Federation has said is wrong, go to court. But I think, and the court will interpret. And it's not just the literary rule of interpretation that is available to the judges. We have the golden rule of interpretation. We have the mischief rule of interpretation that looks at the mischief that the legislation intends to remedy. and then address it. And of course, we have the purposive rule of interpretation. You don't just look at Section 2 in isolation of the rest of. What is the EFCC Act 2004 designed to achieve? To combat economic and financial crimes. Are you saying a lawyer is eminently not qualified? A lawyer understands all the terrain. He understands investigation. He understands prosecution. He understands adjudication. He understands the best practices about combating corruption. So it's not just look at that. I've looked at Section 2 of the EFCC Act.
Okay. So one thing that, I mean, you've spoken about this quite laudably, but let's bring in the entire, because it would seem like the federal government listened to your colleague, Mr. Femi Falana, when he talked about the Federal Character Commission, Federal Character Principle, that it has to come in, there has to be a balance. Are you satisfied with the appointment of the new chairman of the ICPC?
Well, for geographical balance, because let us face it, the entire 6 geopolitical zones in the country have people that are eminent, capable, of character to deliver. So appointments into public offices ought not to be lopsided. Apart from this, the man, Professor Bolaji Owosoye, whose tenure is about, has done very well in ICPC. One of the most cerebral minds that you can think about.
But there are those who thought.
But you see, if Olukoye is coming to EFCC and he's from the south, it doesn't make sense to also have the leader of the ICPC come from the south.
Okay.
You understand me?
Okay.
Because we have eminent people all over the place. But I want to salute Professor Bolaji Owosoye for his stellar performance in the ICPC.
Okay.
And I believe that young man, I won't say young man, is my oga.
Okay.
His services ought to be deployed elsewhere because he's a cerebral, a competent person.
Well, let me believe that.
And Adamu Aliyu is coming in.
Yeah. Okay.
He's also very competent because he's a senior advocate of Nigeria. You don't rise to the inner bar if you're not qualified.
Okay.
Again, if you see the ICPC, which is also agency, and there's no furore about the appointment of the ICPC chairman, why should there be furore about that of this?
Okay, my colleagues in Abuja have questions for you.
Yes.
Chamberlain.
Well, yeah.